Good evening, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here on the Variable Play Network. My name is Javi, and welcome to Sunday Night Magic, where we talk about all things magic. So it's been a while since I've been here, like just doing a straight up video talking about a specific topic. I know that we've been doing some live gameplay videos for the last few episodes, and in the midst of all of that, apparently I lost count of or I lost track of the episode count. So we got up to 41, but there is no episode 39. So today is episode 39. We're going back in time, I suppose. So today is going to be just a very specific topic that I wanted to go over and kind of, um, give people some recommendations. Magic the Gathering has been really releasing a lot of sets recently. Streets of New Capenna came out about a month ago, followed by Commander Legend Battle at Baldur's Gate, which we will be talking about today. And actually, Double Masters for 2022 is scheduled to come out this month. So it's three sets. Like, it's almost there's a new set every month. It's hard to keep up with everything, and I don't really like chasing hype so much that a lot of people talk about specific cards and how they're going to break the game and everything. And once they actually get into the pods and into the games, people soon realize that, oh, it isn't as strong as it seems. Like, so many cards like tank in value just because of like initial assessment of what they could be and then what they actually turn out to be. So one perfect example is actually the well, let's just say the most recently released set that unfortunately kind of like hit the ground with a thud. That Commander Legends at Battle for Baldur's Gate hasn't been looking that good. So today, I kind of wanted to touch the topic and kind of give you guys some ideas. So what we're going to be covering today is my top legend and background pairings that come from um, Commander Legends Battle of Baldur's Gate. So for those of you that aren't aware, so this is the D&D set. So last year, Magic the Gathering put out Dungeons and Dragons Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. So they made a standard set that was themed around Dungeons and Dragons. This time around, they released a new set, but instead of it being standard legal, they tied it together with Commander Legends. And that's where we come in here with Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. Hey, we got a comment. Okay, and that is something I am not going to be answering over this live stream. So pass on that. Sorry. I'll take a magic related question if you do have one. All right, so pretty much what makes this set a little unique is that the last Commander Legends introduced partners. It's an old mechanic that was introduced. I would say, when was the last Commander Legends? I would say maybe 2020. Was it 2020 or 2021? But basically, partners came from an older commander set that allowed you to have two commanders. This time around, they decided to go with a different approach altogether, and they decided to make legendary creatures that happen to be based from D&D lore. I personally am not really familiar with these characters. I know that they are part of several storylines and modules in Dungeons and Dragons, so I won't be touching on the lore today, but instead on the very specific mechanic that they brought in called background. For example, what you're looking at here on the screen. So if you take a look on the left, you'll see Lulu, the loyal, I'm going to say Holophant. So it's supposed to be a flying elephant that is holy. Hey, Ron, thank you for joining. Hello, hello. I hope that you find today's episode helpful, give you some ideas for maybe building a commander deck, or maybe when we draft Commander Legends. You never know. So, going to this mechanic, you have Lulu, the Holophant. We don't need to touch all of the details here: casting cost, power, toughness, and even its basic abilities. That's all good. That this legendary creature, an elephant angel, happens to be able to do all of these things that it says it does. But on the bottom of the card, you'll see it has a specific ability called Choose a Background. You can have a background as your second commander. So instead of it being partnered up with another legendary creature, instead you can now partner your legends with a legendary enchantment. When we say legendary, that means you're only allowed to have one copy of them at a time in games. So if you have ways of copying creatures or enchantments, you're not going to be able to keep them. One's going to pop. You should only have one in play at all times. So let's give you an example of what the backgrounds look like. To the right of Lulu, you see Feywild Visitor. It is a legendary enchantment, and this is the first time we've ever seen a subtype called background. Commander creatures you own. So basically, this enchantment gives your commander additional abilities. So essentially, the two of these sit in your command zone, and you are allowed to play them both. Um, One allows you to have a background, and then the background gives an additional ability to your legend, essentially changing your deck's color identity to blue and white in this example. So Lulu is a white creature, Feywild Visitor is a blue enchantment. You officially now can play two colors. So that's how Wizards decided to go around the partner mechanic so that you could play two colors. Previously, you had a white partner and let's say a blue partner, and so you play blue and white. This here is just another way of going around it, and it's actually pretty interesting because not a lot of players have enchantment hate. So one half of this is almost untargetable, but it's also something that isn't that great because it only affects your commander creatures. So it's an enchantment that is just specific to one thing that you have, your other um, legendary creature sitting in the command zone. So it's also very limited. But to give you some ideas of just how good you can build these things, I've come up with a list of some legends that allow you to choose backgrounds and some recommended backgrounds for you to think about. So let's go to the next one. This here is my honorable mentions. So yeah, before we proceed, one of the things I got to do also, I noticed is that I'm going to take away the banners because it kind of gets in the way of the casting cost and text. So let's just get rid of that. Renari, Merchant of Marvels, is a 4 to cast Dragon Artificer 2/4, and it does let you choose a background. I don't really have any specific pairing with Renari in mind. I haven't really gotten too deep into building it, but the idea that I have here is Renari's abilities read as follows. You may cast dragon spells and artifact spells as if though they had flash. I personally do not really have any desire to build a dragon based deck, but it says artifact spells. This is a living quicksilver mirror. It allows it. Sorry, it's a quicksilver mirror that sits in your command zone. So if you have any build that requires you to run artifacts, let's say outside of your turn, and really to optimize the way that you play, this is pretty good. Its only downside is that it doesn't do anything else. It doesn't have draw. It doesn't have self protection or preservation. So it's kind of an easy target. It will die, and it's really geared to maybe helping you with dragons. But I honestly couldn't care less about the dragon part. It's really artifacts is what got my attention. I haven't thought of anything for it yet, so it sits there until I have an idea. Hence, honorable mention. Now, for the backgrounds, first one that came to mind is called Guild Artisan. Oh, hey, Keo. Good evening. Thank you for joining. So, actually, you know what? When you open up packs of Commander Legends, you will be getting backgrounds and creatures in each pack. So, if you look at the rarity symbols here, we're looking at uncommons and even a rare, or I think haunted one is a mythic. That the haunted one comes from the pre-constructed Commander decks. So, there's actually a lot of them to choose from. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's a combination of 52 um, creatures and backgrounds all together. So there's a lot of combinations to play with, and you're going to end up at least with two color combinations every time. So going back to Guild Artisan, two to cast legendary enchantment. Commander creatures you own have, whenever this creature attacks a player, if nobody else has more life than that player, you get two treasures. Getting treasures is great, but your commander or that legendary creature attacking needs to be able to survive. So I haven't really figured out which would be the best pairing for any of these legendaries. Like, let's say if you give it to Renari here, he's a 2/4. He will eventually die. There will be a blocker big enough, and you're always going after the player with the most life. So you're kind of spreading your attack. Like, the moment you hit somebody at least twice, they're no longer the player with the most life. You end up going to another player and to another player. You're not making friends this way, and it could really bite you in the ass. So I haven't really figured out what pairing really works with this without it just, I don't know, drawing the ire of an entire table. So honorable mention as well. Last one is Haunted One. So this is actually, I believe, included in the Commander Legend pre-constructed decks. Because if you look on the bottom, it doesn't actually have a card count. Like, it doesn't have the slash of how many. So it's outside of the set. So it's three to cast. Commander creatures you own have, whenever this creature becomes tapped. So it doesn't even need to attack, it just has to tap. It and other creatures you control that share a creature type with it. So let's say, using Renari here as an example, all dragons and all artificers are included. So in that realm, that when it becomes tapped, it and all other creatures you control that share a creature type get +2/+0 and gain Undying. Undying means if the creature dies, it comes back into the game with a +1/+1 counter. But if a creature with a +1/+1 counter hits the graveyard and dies, it's not coming back anymore. Basically, it gives you a second time use for a creature. So it comes back a little stronger, but if it dies again, it's wasted. Interesting, though, is that the Undying is only until end of turn. So that once your turn ends and somebody kills one of your creatures, the Undying effect doesn't take place. So it's really on that moment that when it becomes tapped, that whole turn suddenly has a little bit of creature protection. I would probably recommend this in like an elf or something very combat driven build, but there is no specific legendary creature right now that I can see complementing that. So that's why it's in the honorable mentions as well. With that said, let me go ahead and move into my recommendations. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a total of either eight or nine. So I didn't really go with a full top 10 here, and you'll see why, because some of them have more than one recommendation. First one is very simple. All right. This is, I want to pronounce this as Baracus. So Baracus Party Leader, another card that only comes from the pre constructed Commander Legend set, along with a background that is also from the pre constructed sets. Um, there is a black white pre-constructed deck that is specifically for party, which is an old mechanic from Adventures at Zendikar. That it a party consists of a cleric, rogue, warrior, and a wizard. So if you have four of them, you have a party. Burakos here is 4 to cast 2/4, and it counts as a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. It actually counts as all four. But of course, you can only, so it's not a full party on its own. It's just it can take the place of any of those creature types. Whenever Burakos or Burakos attacks, defending player loses X life, and you create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of creatures on your in your party. So before it even hits and deals combat damage, it deals life loss. So if you're looking at the total power and toughness of this creature, when it attacks, your opponent will lose one life because it is a cleric, rogue, wizard, or warrior. It is a count of one. So your opponent loses a life, you get a treasure, And assuming that they do not block it, they also deal 2 damage, which is not bad. The way that you can kind of abuse this, and I think that this is the approach I would take, is pairing it with this background called Folk Hero. Commander creatures you own have the following ability. When you cast a spell that shares a creature type with this creature, draw a card, trigger only once each turn, which really sucks. The whole one per turn thing is crap. But think about it this way: it's a cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard. You can play all 4 of those creature types in your deck, and whenever you play any of them, as long as Baracus and Folk Hero are in play, you get to draw a card. So Black White now has a draw engine of sorts if you just play creatures that match a type with it. There's actually a really good black and white creature called Timna, the Weaver, which is a cleric, a human cleric. So you technically can even have a secondary draw engine. It's not the greatest combination here. I mean, you can use treasures, which is great. Black has tutoring, the white has artifact tutoring, enchantments, defense, removal. Black has a lot of sacrificial pain and gain mechanics, and black and white actually pair really well in the whole death and taxes type way, that you punish your opponents for when things die or when things come into the game, and everyone starts losing in little increments of life. So I think this is actually a very interesting pairing. And the only reason why this is like probably on the very first here is that I don't have these cards, so I haven't really built around and played with it myself. This is theoretical, and it's really based on the partner mechanic. If either of these are not in the game, you're not getting that draw. So it's also very highly dependent on you protecting your commander and this background. Again, the background, who really boards against enchantment? So you just have to keep Baracus alive. So, something that you might want to consider if you are thinking of focusing on the party mechanic. It should be interesting. Life loss, treasures, damage, creature based. Could be fun. Next is, I'm really going to be butchering this, I guess. Laezel of Vlaakith's Champion. I don't know. I mean, again, I am not familiar really with the whole D&D lore for these characters. So we're looking at a Gith. I'm not even sure what creature type, what Giths are supposed to be, but we're looking at a Gith warrior, a 3 to cast 3/3. Pretty good. Decent stats already. You get what you want for that. But if you would put 1 or more counters on a creature or planeswalker, even on yourself, you put that many plus 1 of that kind of counter. So this is a living sort of, it's not really a duplicator. It's just, it provides a plus 1 for every time counters would be put on anything. So you want to find a way to kind of maximize how you would be producing that. And one of the backgrounds that got my attention was called Master Chef. Yes, the TV show is now a card. So, Master Chef reads as follows. It's a 3 to cast legendary enchantment. Commander creatures you own have. This creature enters the battlefield with a additional +1/+1 counter on it. And other creatures you control enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on them. So everything comes in with a +1/+1 counter. But Liazel's ability says that you add 1 more. Essentially, everything comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters. So it makes everything bigger. So even itself. So let's say you put Master Chef down and then you put in Laezel, she'll come in as a 5/5, which is pretty decent for a 3 to cast. It's a little limiting because, again, this doesn't help you with draw, it doesn't help you with anything else. But the fact that it just makes everything have more counters is pretty good. You can even put planeswalkers in here, or even mechanics that give you like experience counters and stuff like that, as long as it's within the realm of green and white. So Again, a little bit on the bottom of the list because while it is efficient, while it is an interesting thing to build around, I don't really do the +1/+1 counter route. I've seen a lot of people really build some excellent like planeswalker decks as well, using doubling season and other effects of that kind, which is green. So, something to take into consideration for people who like to build that way. Next is Bailoth, Barathil Entertainer, who is again in one of the pre-constructed commander decks, an elf shaman, red elf shaman, which is very interesting, that creatures your opponents control with power less than Bailoth are goaded, which means they have to attack every turn, but they cannot attack you. So you essentially are protected. Whenever a goaded creature attacks or a blocky creature dies, you create a treasure token. So you kind of just stand back and watch your opponents attack each other while you get treasure. How do you ensure that every creature never attacks you? Why not use Raised by Giants, a 6 to cast enchantment that says your commander creature now has the base power and toughness of 10/10 and also counts as a giant? What that means is every creature that is less than 10 in power can no longer attack you and has to attack other players. Has to. Goaded is a requirement. So they can't even stand back and play defense unless they are just, brand new, like summoning sickness creatures. So this is a great little political build in a way that you're forcing other players to beat each other up. You're going to get the hate of the table, but you're also playing red and green, which is really, really good. Red has rituals for fast mana. Green has a lot of fast mana, like unbelievably fast mana. And red actually has a lot of complementing things here that are related to giants as well from the old Lorwyn set. So you can kind of mesh this together and play a game of magic wherein you're not even necessarily attacking, but you're just protecting Bailoth and making sure that everyone else kills each other. And the moment they run out of creatures, you have a 10/10 giant elf shaman. So again, red green, interesting color combination. There is another red green combination here later that I am personally running that I'll talk about later on. So let's move to the next one. This one is Scanos Dragonheart. This one is probably the weirdest one, and because I don't see myself building anything related to dragons, but I think that this is a very overlooked commander. There's a lot of potential here, and let me walk you through that. Scanos Dragonheart is a 5 to cast 4/4, which it's okay. At least there's only one green, which is fine. When Dragonheart or Scanos attacks, it gets +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among other dragons. So you need another dragon that you control or dragon cards in your graveyard. That second half is what people tend to forget. The graveyard counts. So, what color helps you put things in your graveyard? Black does. So I decided to go with two possible background options. The first one is Criminal Past. This one's kind of crappy in a way, but it can help you because commander creatures you control have menace, which means it needs two blockers. That your opponent needs to have two blockers, which helps him go through. And this creature gets +X/+0, where X is the number of creatures in your graveyard. If you have a single dragon in your graveyard, it gives Canos +X/+X. And then it also gives it +1/+0, so to speak. So, and then Menace. So it adds on abilities, it adds on to its power, making it easier for you to take someone out with commander damage. But what might probably help it even better is that if you use another background here called Scion of Halaster, it's a 2 to cast, which is a lot cheaper, and commander creatures you own have the following. when the first time you would draw a card each turn, okay, so this is not even your turn, each turn. If you are drawing a card for the first time, instead, look at the top two cards of your library, put one into your graveyard, and the other one back on top, and then you draw. Essentially, you're filtering the top two cards of your deck and then choosing which one you want to draw. Let's just say that there's a dragon. Put it in the grave. Skanos counts dragon cards in your graveyard. You can put the biggest thing that you have. Black has a lot of dragons. Green, not so much. But you also have the option of changeling creatures. They count as dragons. So, like, I know that there's a new dragon that was recently released that is a 5/2. Okay? So, imagine throwing it into your graveyard, and when Skanos attacks, it basically it counts where X is the greatest power among dragons you control or in the graveyard. So, um, it doesn't count itself. So let's say it counts to 5/2, Skanos becomes a 9/9. Something to think about. You technically get to control your top card when you draw, and then you can feed your graveyard with dragons, essentially making Skanos bigger when he attacks. It's combat based for black green, it's dragon specific, so it's not that great, but I consider it a very interesting pairing that, when I saw Skanos, no one was interested in it. And I think having this kind of pairing together can give people some wild ideas. Remember that green is also the green and black are both the best colors for infect. So you might be able to even build that as a sub theme. Or even just a flat out animator. Doesn't even have to be dragon based. Next one. This one is also very interesting. I am intending to actually build this in some capacity. We're looking at Safana, Kalimport Cutthroat, a 3 to cast 3/2 menace. So it's a rogue. Menace is good, which means that Safana can probably attack and go unblocked if you play her early enough. At the beginning of your end step, if you have the initiative, which is a new card that came out from this set, it's like a new dungeon, but it's called the initiative. It's a combination of um, a dungeon mechanic along with the monarch mechanic from the old conspiracy sets. Basically, if you have the initiative, at the end of your turn you get a treasure, and then you get three of those treasures if you manage to complete a dungeon. So the initiative actually is also a dungeon. It does have, I think, the underdark or undercity printed on the back of it, so you can do that and complete it. Now, how do you ensure that you always have the initiative? You should be able to connect with your opponent unopposed. So, Sword Coast Sailor is the first thing that comes to mind. Your commander, which will become now blue black, okay, I mean your color identity, whenever this creature attacks a player, if no one else has more life than that player, this creature can't be blocked. You just have to hit the player with the most life. Tricky part is you may not be able to attack the person who took the initiative from you. So you're kind of gambling there, but just having an unblockable commander is okay, I guess, and that potentially making treasure for you. But instead, why not build black and white? Safana built with noble heritage as a background. Now, there's a lot of text here, so let me just read it really quickly for you. Noble heritage reads as follows: when this creature enters the battlefield or at the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on creatures they control. So you're letting your opponents buff up their creatures. Why would you do that? For each opponent who does, you gain protection from that player until your next turn. That means that you can't receive damage from them, which means that you probably will not lose the initiative. So you can kind of just sit back, end your turn, and making treasures, preparing for the next turns. It's a weird kind of prison build that you're letting your opponents get bigger and bigger in the hopes that that they'll kill each other off, that you have protection from them. It may not serve you too well later in the game. Let's say if you're going one on one already with an opponent because he has some massive creatures, but black and white also are the colors of removal. Like, not even just destroy, I mean exile, like remove from game, or even just full on board wipes. So you can abuse this to an extent that you just have a treasure generator. So I think the black white is the more interesting approach to take. Well, because the black blue one can work against your favor if the wrong player takes the initiative. So that's another recommendation that I hope you guys find interesting. Now we're moving towards the latter half of this, that um, there are some of these that I am actually currently playing, and also some of the friends in my play group are playing, that hopefully will give you some good ideas. So this is the last test that I'm actually halfway through building, and this one is, I think, potentially game breaking that a lot of people will not be prepared for. So we're looking at Abdel Adrian Gorian's Ward. So this one's a lot also to take into consideration. It's very wordy. He's a 5 to cast 4/4 human warrior. Only needs one white, which is pretty good, which means that he can even go down as early as turn 1 if you have the right opening hand. When Abdel enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you control until Abdel leaves the battlefield. So you lose stuff, but they're also replaced by 1/1 soldier tokens for each of those permanents exiled. The moment Abdel dies, or leaves the battlefield rather, all of those permanents come back. So imagine if you open your turn, put down a bunch of mana rocks, bring out Abdel really fast, and then exile those artifacts. You get 1/1 soldiers, and if he happens to leave, you get those back untapped. It just says that the permanents you control are exiled, and so they'll come back refreshed. Okay, so if you have a card that also exiles Abdel, like a white card called Fiend Hunter, when it comes in, it exiles another creature until Fiend Hunter leaves. You can essentially have Fiend Hunter and Abdel exiling each other continuously in an endless loop until you decide to change targets. And while that's happening, you keep getting 1/1s, and you keep getting all of your mana rocks and other permanents back over and over again. So every enter the battlefield, every leave the battlefield effect is on a infinite loop. And how do you abuse that? Candlekeep Sage background says, when your commander enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. So if you endlessly flicker Abdel with another white creature that also exiles a creature, and mind you, there are at least three or four other creatures that exist inside blue white. I think there might even be a fifth, because like you can technically play let's see, there's a 6 to cast card that has soulbound, that it's just like, oh, Deadeye Navigator. Deadeye Navigator and Abdel is so easy to pull off, and is full on infinite. You just need to abuse or find an outlet for the infinite mana or infinite enter the battlefield triggers. You have gain life, alter the brood, you can mill out all of your opponents. So it takes a little bit of a setup, but you're playing blue and white. Blue and white have so much protection, counter protection, creature protection, hex proof, redirection. There's so much that it can do. So this one is, I'm about 50% into my build, and hopefully I'll be able to run it in my next gaming session so that you will see this in action. So this one is one that I am very excited to build soon. Next is this is actually my current one of my current decks. This is Wilson, the Refined Grizzly, and the background of Tavern Brawler. So before we get to Tavern Brawler, Wilson, a 2 to cast 2/2 bear that cannot be countered, has vigilance, reach, trample, and ward. Ward 2, mind you. It is a ultimate toolbox bear. It has all of the abilities that you wouldn't expect out of a bear because hate bears are a magic staple that are two to cast two-twos that happen to just have a little bit of hate built into them that will slow down your opponents. This time, though, you have a bear that has just about every ability that you'd want a bear to have. Of course, it's not flying, but okay, vigilance means it doesn't tap, reach means it can block flyers, and then it tramples over your opponents, and it has protection. How do you abuse this? You gotta make that bear big. So I decided to go with Tavern Brawler. Tavern Brawler reads that at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. Then your commander gets plus X plus 0, which X is the mana value of that card, and you may play that card this turn. That is actually almost akin to drawing a card during your turn. So it gives red and green a draw engine. So you have a 2/2 that could potentially be massive because of like a plus X plus 0. It doesn't tap to attack, it has trample. So you just have to make it big. And what I decided to do is that it says at the beginning of your upkeep, okay? So this happens at least once a turn. So you're pretty much building around a way to make it bigger and bigger every time. That you start your turn off with an extra card that you're allowed to play and add on. So you get the exile, you get your draw. You have like two cards every turn, and I think that that's where it can really help out. Um, there are other backgrounds that you could probably use, but what I decided to go with here is I put in a lot, and I mean every possible red spell that brings about extra combat so that Wilson can just continuously get bigger and attack. So I'm having fun with this because I don't typically build combat based decks, and I decided to build one specifically because of the game group that I am currently playing with. And so far, it's been really fun to play with. It really tests your creativity in terms of like how you're gonna go about with combat. But again, you can have a lot of fun with this. So I'm enjoying it. I hope that you find some way for it to also uh, build Wilson. Trust me. Even if you build it as mono green, it's gonna be fun. I've never seen a creature like draw so much fear just because it has all of these abilities. Next is another deck that I'm currently running, which is Candlekeep Researcher combined with Cultist of the Absolute. So you play black and blue together. Val is a human wizard, 4 to cast 2/3 with vigilance, which means it can attack and then use its ability. So it's pretty good. You can tap Val to add an amount of colorless mana equal to her toughness. You cannot spend the mana though to cast spells from your hand. So what do you use the mana for? You can use it for activated abilities, cycling cards, anything that just isn't casting a spell. And you can choose a background. The background that I decided to go with was Cultist of the Absolute because your creatures, commander creatures you own, get +3/+3. So essentially making Val a 5/6 flying death touch and has ward, forcing your opponents to pay 3 life just to target her. It has the downside of at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice a creature. But I typically don't ever let it get to that point because when you play this, she can essentially tap for 6 colorless. And if you have any artifact that untaps a creature, there are at least three that I can think of: Sword of the Perunes, Umbral Mantle, Talisman of Dominance. Those are three artifacts that blue and black can easily tutor for. And when you have it in play, you pretty much go infinite. You will either have a infinitely powered creature that is flying, death touch, ward, and vigilance, or you can also just have infinite colorless mana to spend in other effects. But if you are using Staff of Domination, you actually get to draw your entire deck. And black blue is also the colors of the quickest combo in Magic, which is Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation. So you can technically run the combo without even needing the risk of Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact, because you're just going to draw your library and display Thassa's Oracle. So um, there's a lot of ways that you can build this, but essentially infinite colorless mana that just cannot be used for casting spells. And the combo is already sitting in your command zone. It's always there ready for you to play it. So you can't go wrong with that. You can access it when you're ready. You don't have to worry about looking for Val or looking for Cultists of the Absolute. The only thing that you need to look for is the outlet for the mana, or at least what would make it go infinite. So you just need the third piece of the puzzle. And black and blue have, I'm going to say, at a minimum, at least 5 to 6 extremely efficient shooters to go help you find that. So I've been having so much fun with this. It's not combat based, so I've had one instance where I did have to play Val as a 5/6 flyer and just hit people with commander damage. But I think that, no, actually, no, without the Cultist of the Absolute, it was just Umbral Mantle. It was just an infinitely powered creature. So there is that approach that you can take, but I'm not really playing this for combat. This is a combo deck in two of my favorite colors. Now, the final one for today is a very, very interesting one that has like two possible builds for it. This is Karlach, Fury of Avernus. Karlach is a 5 to cast 5/4 Tiefling Barbarian. I think it's Tiefling, but I always used to pronounce it as Tiefling. Um, Whenever you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures, they gain first strike, and after this, there's an extra combat phase, which means that you get to attack twice. So, how can you possibly abuse this? Well, you're probably going to need Karlach to just survive combat. So, I recommend using Sword Coast Sailor. Whenever you attack an opponent with the most life, that creature's unblockable. So Karlach doesn't have to worry about blockers and dying. Or Agent of the Shadow Thieves. It's so a black enchantment. Whenever this creature attacks the player with the most life, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains Death Touch, which means no one's going to want to block it, and Indestructible, which means even if they block it, it's not going to die. So you are protecting Karlach. And what you can do here is red has extra combat cards. You have Relentless Assault and so much other things that you can build into this. So using blue, you can even add extra turn spells, essentially having infinite combat. Or if you go at the black route, you have a way of maybe giving Karlach Infect, or maybe using the tutors from black to find the extra combat spells that red offers. So you can go either direction here. Blue has more protection, of course, and has a way of, yeah, the extra turns and maybe being able to provide more combat tricks. But black has a way of bringing in The combination of black and red can definitely help you in terms of making it really hard for your opponents to deal with the situation. The colors of Rakdos bring in some insane creatures, insane hate cards, and can even force people to lose every card in their hand, or even just introduce some really, really bigger threats that the extra combat that Karlak provides and giving them all first strike makes it a nightmare to deal with. So this one I'm waiting to actually go up against because one player in my game group is currently constructing this. But this one I think is one of the most um, interesting because it's pure abuse. It's combat based but can go into an infinite loop, which actually you can even try building strictly just on mono red. Maybe this is where the guild artisan card can go, but again, I'd rather have a way to protect Karlach. So unblockable or indestructible are both the approaches I would rather take. And blue has some pretty good spells to back you up, and then black has some really good shooters and ways of dealing with board state so that you can go swing in and hit hard. And that pretty much brings today's episode to an end. So let me go ahead and just pop this right back to the start here. Oh, sorry. There. So we are again back to, yeah, pretty much my top my top list of legend and background pairings from Commander Legends Battle Baldur's Gate. So if you haven't picked up any cards from this set, so the next one is coming out in July for Double Masters. So a lot of people are excited for Double Masters 2022, but I think that there are a lot of really good cards that may have been overlooked at the financial bomb that was Commander Legends Battle of Baldur's Gate. I hope that this episode was able to give you guys some ideas of, some interesting pairings that you may want to build a commander deck around. And until then, thank you so much. For those of you who joined the episode and those of you who are still watching now, thank you so much for your support. Till next time, keep gaming.